Hi, we're going to do lesson 1-4, that's measure and classify angles. The big question here is how do you identify whether an angle is acute, right, obtuse, or straight? There's a bunch of vocabulary words in this lesson, so we're going to start by filling in the frame. There's going to be 2 different videos for this lesson. The first one is just going to be the frame. So look at your all about angles frame. Now remember, I may go kind of fast. If you need to, pause as you're going through this. So all about angles is about everything we need to know about angles. Angles are made up of 2 different rays with the same endpoint. So angles have 2 rays, they share an endpoint. Draw them like that. Our first main idea is a side. The side for each ray is a side. So this is one side and this is another side. Our next main idea here is a vertex. So the endpoint where the rays meet, this is your vertex. So these rays meet right here. That would be your vertex. So the endpoint where the rays meet. The next main idea is how to name. How do we name angles? So we have 2 options. We can use the angle sign with a vertex, or we can use the angle sign and use one point, the vertex, and another point. So if I had an angle that looked like this, here's point A, here's point B, and here's point C. I could either name this angle B, because B is the vertex, or I could name it angle ABC, or I could name it angle CVA. But your vertex has to be in the middle if you're using 3 points, or you can just say the angle sign and your vertex. The next main idea is acute angles. Acute angles are between 0 and 90 degrees. So an example would be like this. That would be an acute angle because it's less than 90 degrees. Our next main idea is a right angle. Right angles are exactly 90 degrees, and you've probably seen these before. A right angle looks like this, and we put that little box in the corner to say, yep, that's a right angle, it's 90 degrees. Our next main idea is obtuse. Obtuse angles are between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So if this is one ray, and here would be the other, that would be an example of an obtuse angle. Our next main idea is straight angles. Straight angles measure exactly 180 degrees. So this would be a straight angle. Here's my vertex, and the rays go in opposite direction. Congruent angles, congruent is an important word we'll use quite a bit. Congruent angles have the same measure, and this sign right here means congruent. We also use matching arcs to show that angles are congruent. So if I drew 2 angles like this, and I put one arc in both of them, that would tell me those angles are congruent. Our so what for this frame is that these are the big ideas or the main ideas about angles that we will see and use throughout geometry. You have to be able to name angles. You have to be able to tell what kind of angles they are. You have to be able to recognize when they're congruent. So let's look at the back side of this frame and finish filling it in. So again, all about angles is about everything we need to know about angles. Angles are made up of 2 different rays with the same endpoint. That endpoint, remember, is called our vertex. So our next main idea is an angle bisector. Think of the word bisector. Bi means 2. So a ray that divides an angle into 2 equal angles. So if I had an angle here, and I drew in an angle bisector, that means this piece and this piece would be equal. This would be my angle bisector. My next main idea is complementary angles. Complementary angles have a sum of 90 degrees. That means when you add them up, you get 90 degrees. And one thing you could think of is it is right to give compliments. Well, right means 90 degrees. So that might be one thing to add here. It is right to give compliments. So that kind of ties right angle and complementary together. Our next main idea is supplementary angles. Supplementaries, their sum is 180 degrees, so they add up to 180 degrees. And I think of supplementary with the S, just like straight. Supplementary and straight both have S's and they're both 180 degrees. The next main idea is adjacent angles. Adjacent angles, they're two angles that share a common side. So if I had an angle here, and then I could draw another angle that shares that side, those would be adjacent angles. They share a side. I could also have a larger angle, and then I could draw an angle in the middle of it. Those would be adjacent angles as well, because they share a side. Our next main idea is a linear pair. Linear sounds like line. So a linear pair here, they're adjacent angles whose non-common sides are opposite rays. So the sides that they don't share are opposite rays. So a linear pair might look like this. There could be one angle, and if my other angle shared this side, but then this other one went out in the opposite direction, that would have to be 180 degrees, and those two angles would be a linear pair. The next main idea is vertical angles. These are two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. So, example, there could be one, and then if I have this ray that makes a line with this one, and then this ray that makes a line here, this angle and this angle would be vertical angles. I think of it as like two V's that are exactly the same and touching. Those would be vertical angles. Could also say this angle formed and this angle formed. Those would also be vertical angles. We have the same so what here. These are big ideas or main ideas about angles that we'll see and use throughout geometry. So make sure you watch the next video as well to make sure that you get everything you need for this lesson.